Today, I want to welcome Rusty Fulling. He is the founder and CEO of Fulling Management and Accounting. Since April of 2000, wow, that's a long time. Rusty has been focused on helping business leaders make sense of their numbers, grow their profits, and gain peace of mind. And I'm sure there's somebody that's listening right now. They're like, "Oh, I don't want to listen to a podcast on accounting." We have stories, salacious stories of automatic weapons in dangerous places. And hopefully, we will be talking about how one company was growing itself
Mm.
into poverty and how to recognize that. So, I think there's a lesson here for everybody. I hope you hang in there and get ready to be challenged a little bit. Rusty, welcome.
Hey, Craig, thanks, man. I'm excited to be on here. Loved your podcast and the different guests you've had. So hopefully we can keep the ball rolling here. So
Absolutely. And now you're in Kansas. And what's the name of the town in
yep,
Kansas?
Olathe, Kansas. We're just outside of Kansas City, and yeah, we're actually a virtual company. We went all virtual about 4 years ago during the COVID season, and just never invited anybody back to the office.
Wow. How'd that go down?
And I cut out a little bit, Craig. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
I'm sorry. How did that when that all happened, how did it work out with your staff?
Yeah, it actually worked out extremely well. We had already had one team member that was remote, so we had already been doing some remote work for probably 5 or 6 years, and so we just had everyone else go that direction. And one of the things we did during COVID was just really be intentional about relationships and health, emotional and mental health during that season, and so created buddy systems, where we're checking in with each other and having a lot of calls like what we're doing here over a Zoom connection, and we really began creating a whole new culture, and it's just really been amazing to see. We now get together in person once a year. In fact, we just flew everybody to Kansas City last week for a 3-day offsite, and it's just like an old high school reunion. Everyone getting together because now we have team members in 5 or 6 states, where before we were just.
Yeah. And I mean, it's good that you had a start. I mean, COVID was such a reset for people. I
Yeah.
remember I remember in the first month or so of COVID, wishing I had bought, 100 webcams because I could have
Sure.
I could have made a fortune on those because you couldn't buy them on Amazon.
Yes. Yes.
But the one of the things that you said was checking in on the emotional health of people.
Yeah.
And I remember doing that as well because, it was a very traumatic time, but I'm wondering if that's something that we should continue doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. We've never said stop, but some have just kind of phased out over the last few years. However, there's some of ours that are continuing, every Thursday or Tuesday, or to continue to check in with their that they have over the last 4 years. So we've actually implemented other check-ins and other things that we're doing throughout the day and throughout the week. We often get the comment of, man, I feel closer to our team now than I ever did at companies where we worked in person. And so it's really creating that environment where, yeah, it's really collaborative versus we'll see you next week on the Zoom call.
So how does somebody achieve that? Because there's a lot of people that are still trying to figure that out, how to run a remote team effectively. What would you say are
Yeah.
the critical ingredients?
Yeah, I'd say there's three that we've seen really instrumental in companies, and one is just that weekly. Make sure you're at least getting together weekly, and so we get together on Zoom once a week, do a all staff meeting, and then we break into small groups where we're just building relationship and learning some leadership skills. So that's one, and then one other thing we do is really look for ways that we can serve together and have fun together. So we'll actually do virtual Christmas parties. And the first time I heard of that, Craig, I thought this is the worst thing in the world, worst idea. And I'll tell you what, we've got a creative team that just is second to none, and just a lot of fun together. And then the other part of that is serving together. And so we get to we'll do like a virtual 6K to raise money for World Vision for clean water, or we'll do a generosity challenge where we'll do some matching funds to different charities. So that's the second piece of that. And then the third is just making sure you are getting together at least once a year for kind of that celebration and strategic planning time. And so those three touches, man, we've just seen so much benefit from doing that and building that team culture.
Yeah. You know, it's wild. I'm in Austin,
Yeah.
and you know, the big building projects, those take years to get started and
Yeah.
years to complete. And probably the prettiest building, there's two architecturally unique buildings in Austin. One of them was supposed to be occupied by Google. And
Mm,
after the pandemic, the building was completed during the pandemic.
yeah.
And then Google just chose to never occupy that building. And, I just, as I drive around, I see so much office space that's just sitting empty.
Yeah.
So I think the big companies certainly have had some challenges figuring this out. I think one thing that certainly the big companies do, they started deploying keyboard loggers and other tools
Mm,
to try to figure out how much people were goofing off.
yeah.
And I don't know, that felt a little bit creepy.
Hey, if you have to do that, I guess that goes back to, did you hire the right people? And so, I mean, it starts with building a team of trust, and you have to have that as a basic component, because if you're tracking keystrokes and login times and bathroom breaks, I mean, my word, I think that's it's not bringing everybody back in the office. It's going to fix the culture in that case.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, and I think that's, you just mentioned culture, and that's one of my biggest fears when people went remote. I started predicting during the pandemic. I said, 5 years from now, there's going to be a big growth in culture consultants,
Oh,
people
yeah.
helping
Yeah.
companies rebuild culture.
Yeah.
How do you build culture when you're remote?
Yeah. Yeah. We've watched some other groups do some really neat things and tried to take some inspiration from those. And the things that we've gleaned and applied again is just that consistency. And so for us, building that culture is having core values that really align with, hey, here's what we want to be all about. And every week we're spending time on some of those core values within our leadership training for our entire team, not just our top leaders. And so just bringing everybody in as a team and not isolating, oh, you're remote, so we're not going to do this for you. And just treating everybody the same. That leadership, consistent leadership training, that's just been so big. Again, aligning with our core values.
So when I hear leadership training, that's kind of
Yep.
a broad topic.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
What are some specifics? How are you training your leaders? What are
Yeah.
specific things that you're doing to build a culture of leaders?
Yes, yes. We just started a new video series this week by Todd Henry about bravery. Thinking bravery, what does that, how does that affect an accounting firm? My word. Well, it's really talking about stepping outside some of your comfort zones, and it could be, hey, I want to lead this meeting this time with a client, or it could be some simple things like that. So today is just leaning into, what are those things that are stopping you from being brave in these areas of growth. We just wrapped up one on purpose. What's your personal purpose statement, and what does that look like? How does that align with the company's purpose and vision? And so it's so what we practically do is we'll spend about 15 minutes with a leadership video from some different leadership groups around the country. We'll show that video to our entire team, and we'll break into small groups and discuss those, and then come back together and share some of our insights from that. That we've been doing that for, my goodness, probably 6 or 7 years at least. And again, that just gets everybody on the same page from that leadership and culture standpoint.
So purpose is one of those topics I'm really interested in
Yeah,
because there's part of me that when I look at the culture, I see people trying to figure out what their purpose is.
yeah,
They
yeah,
seem a little bit adrift. So I'm
yeah,
really curious when you hear people talk about their personal
yeah.
purpose, what's kind of the range of things that you're hearing?
Yeah, yeah. It could be the way they lead their family. It could be some aspirational goals that they're trying to achieve. I'll say when I personally, I'll just share mine. When I personally went through that, I came up with five statements or five attributes that this is what I see in purpose, and it's things like encourage, guide, equip, serve, and listen. And out of those, you could actually put the word other, encourage others, guide others, serve others. And so the idea there is throughout my day, I want to make sure I'm checking the boxes on those. Have I done this today?
Yeah. Well, and that's amazing clarity. I got an email this morning and not on leadership, but more on marketing. It was one of these things they had four short lines and I looked at it and it was amazingly powerful and amazingly clear. And I was like, I think
Mm.
I need to put that on the wall somewhere.
Yeah, yeah,
But having that kind of daily focus that kind of pulls you back
yeah.
to that purpose, um, I could see how that would rearrange your day.
Yeah. What's neat is when your personal purpose aligns with your business purpose. And so when I look at that, I can say encourage clients, guide clients, equip clients, serve clients, listen to clients. So you can apply some of those personal, and that's where I'd say that's kind of where the magic happens is when your personal mission is aligned with your business and career mission. It just makes, boy, it just makes life much more fulfilling.
Yeah. So you were telling me, we're going to switch gears a little bit. You were
Yeah.
telling me a story about when your daughter turned 16, what you say, "Hey, let's go do something." What happened?
Sure. Yeah, I thought I'd be a good dad and say, hey, let's do a father-daughter trip, when she turned 16, our oldest. And I'm thinking Disney, and she picked Honduras. And I thought, okay, those are different spots. So we take off for Tegucigalpa, Honduras, to do a little mission trip, and the purpose of the trip was to have her teach six women how to sew and provide
Mm.
some sewing machines and so we flew over the mountain, and literally, boy, the big airliner just drops out of the sky to land in this little valley, and it's one of the most dangerous airports in the world. And so we learned quickly there's actually traffic that drives across the landing strip. And so luckily we landed safe. But as soon as we got off the plane, we were greeted with, soldiers and semi-automatic weapons. And they were having a kind of a military unrest going on. We'll call it that. So we were able to get to the location where we were doing the training, and I say she did an amazing job. So it was neat to watch a 16-year-old that did not speak Spanish work with another local 16-year-old translate with to these six ladies, and in 3 days teach these ladies how to sew. And they went around the room and told their stories afterwards. Hey, this is going to get me off the street. I'll be able to provide for my family. This is going to just make a huge life change for me. This is going to do this. And what I learned from that was, boy, there were so many things, so many obstacles we ran into. Electricity didn't work, or this product, these supplies didn't make it. And watching my 16-year-old just adapt and to these circumstances that were coming up, she had prepared to the nth degree. And so she was able to handle those bumps in the road. And sometimes as business leaders, I think we get all, messed up sometimes when things don't go perfect. But watching a 16-year-old just say, hey, no problem. I can make that pattern out of a piece of paper, or we can use this to make that work. And so sometimes we can make life change when we don't get so structured in what we're doing in our day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and I think it's in those moments. People have a false belief that a blank canvas is where you find creativity.
Mm,
I believe the opposite. I believe the tighter the constraints,
Yeah.
is the birthplace of creativity. So when you show up and you have to get something done and there's no
Yeah.
electricity, that's when
Yeah.
you get creative.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the cool thing about watching her, she had vision for far as what she wanted to accomplish. And yes, the path may not have been as direct as she had originally intended, but well, she still accomplished that vision.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And um, what does she say about that trip today?
Yeah, so well, we've done 4 or 5 trips since then.
Mhm.
That's what she said about it. Hey, let's do this different this time. Let's do this, and it's been amazing. In fact, she ended up spending a whole month down there on one occasion, and just coming up with other creative ways to use local resources, instead of shipping things in, find ways to use local resources. So um yeah, just amazing, and the relationships that were developed through that. So yeah, that's really changed. I mean, that was, my goodness, 13 years ago, and it's really changed her trajectory as far as even what she does as a career today.
Yeah. Now, one of the challenges about talking about finances, yeah, it's almost like hosting a podcast talking about dentistry.
Yeah,
It's just not something
yeah,
that people
yeah,
want, but it's necessary. We go to the
yeah.
dentist, or at least me. I used to work for a guy who loved getting his teeth cleaned. I'm like, yeah, let me. I got a doctor. I got a different type of
Right.
doctor that wants you to lay on his couch and talk to
Yeah,
you, him about it. But it's still important.
yeah,
It's still important. And I would say that it's the rare business owner that really wants to get deep into the rare entrepreneur. Let me say that it's the rare entrepreneur
yeah,
that really wants to get deep into the books.
yeah.
What's your advice for somebody like that?
Yeah, well, I would agree, Craig. I do think accounting is boring by itself. Okay, so we'll cut to the chase real quick here. I'd tell you the things that I've appreciated about this platform and kind of the industry that we're in is the stories that the numbers tell. And I think sometimes people get wrapped up in the numbers, and it's like, oh, their eyes glaze over. But when you can use those to tell a story, and I love the analogy of having a CFO is like having using a GPS to really move your business in the right direction and navigate around those closed roads and those pitfalls versus an old paper map that's like, I'm not even sure this road's open anymore. And so when you can use the numbers to tell the story, am I going to be in business 6 months from now? What can I do differently to make this more successful? That's when you're talking to an entrepreneur, do they need to get to the nth degree on the pennies on the balance sheet or the income statement? Probably not, but they do need to know the story.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like the way of putting that. Um, and one of the things, at least in my own journey, I think one of the things that surprised me the most was understanding the levers of cash flow.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's easy for entrepreneurs to just think, okay, I'm just going to work harder at this task
Yeah.
until better outcomes happen. And for me, the big surprise was when it comes to cash flow, there's some levers, you only have to turn them a small
Yeah.
degree to make a big impact. So I don't have to work as hard if
Yeah.
I turn this lever versus another lever.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's amazing. And again, sometimes it's just having somebody to come along guide on some of that. We had an electrician that we worked with years ago, and a service that he just did multiple times, and it was just adjusting the pricing on that, like you just said, just a little bit, and it made tens of thousands of dollars difference because of the multitude of times he's done that throughout the year. So sometimes it can be just little things, but that cash flow forecast that you're talking about, that can be so helpful because it can show us 3, 4, 6 months ahead, maybe even farther than that, how much cash are we going to have, and make decisions based on that. Maybe we need to amp up sales now, or we need to take dollars out for distributions. It gives us some permission to do those kind of things.
You mentioned some story about a deck builder
Yes.
And his
Yes.
problem wasn't, he was getting the business. That wasn't his problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's, yeah, I hear this, oh, I want to double my business next year. And that sounds very lofty. The challenge sometimes is like this, yeah, this deck builder story was they were losing money on every deck they built. And you're thinking, why would you want to double your business if you're losing money on every deck? It's not working harder. It is that working smarter. It's, hey, let's see what it actually cost us to build these before we put the price tag on them for the customer. And so yeah, again, sometimes it just takes that. Maybe we need to step back before we double. And for them, that was the case. They needed to understand their cost so they could then determine what they could charge going forward.
Yeah. Well, and as we're wrapping up, I think there's one thing we got to cover, and that is putting people in charge of money is a scary thing.
Yeah.
And I would say that the way I look at it is good people in the wrong circumstance sometimes make bad choices.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes even the good people, whether it's intentional or unintentional, we've seen that happen before, where maybe a bill is being paid to a vendor that doesn't exist, and that can be detrimental to a small business owner. Sometimes, unfortunately, there's folks that decide they want to pad their own pocket, and the company won't miss a few dollars here and there. And as a business owner, it's so important to have separation of duties and just a second set of eyes looking over that part of your business, because boy, we just have so many stories, unfortunate stories, of seeing business owners being taken advantage of by not having good checks and balances in place.
My wife, for a brief period of time, worked for a bank, and she told
Mhm.
me that nobody knows the entire combination to the safe. There's
Yes.
one person that knows half the combination, someone else that knows the other half.
Yeah.
How do you how do you put that sort of system in place in your finances in a business?
Yeah. Yeah, and that could be as simple as whoever's entering the bills in the system isn't the one that has access to paying the bills. I mean, that's a simple system there. And multiple approvers, if there's a certain dollar amount. So there's a lot of what we call standard operating procedures that can be put in place. Even in the smallest business, there's some really neat things. Today's environment, there's so much electronic transfer of funds. There's some great tools out there that can help you with that. And so we use a lot of those tools with the companies we work with, just because, yeah, we want to make sure they have good checks and balances. Years ago, there was a stack of checks at one of our clients, and the cleaning crew would go in at night and they would steal checks off the bottom of the pile and write checks out, for the electronics store or wherever. And so, one of the checks and balances after the fact was reconciling the bank statement on a regular basis and saying, hey, who bought the big screen TV? And it's making sure you have some of those in place that'll help prevent, but also catch quickly those kind of things. So,
Well, this has been really interesting. And I love I love that we started off with leadership. And I think there's so much there. And then just kind of wrapping up. Um, I mean, I know specific business owners that have lost millions of dollars by not having checks and balances
yeah.
in. And one that almost ended up in deep trouble with the
Oh,
IRS. They were getting ready to seize assets,
oh,
and it was a bookkeeper
yeah.
that
Yeah.
kept two sets of books.
Yeah.
So good advice. Rusty, if somebody wanted to reach you, how could they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. On LinkedIn, Rusty Fulling on LinkedIn, and then go to my personal site. Be great, is rustyfulling.com. So definitely check those out, and that'll lead you to our accounting firm, Fulling Management and Accounting, as well.
All right. Well, Rusty, thanks for being on Leaders and Legacies.
Hey, thanks, Craig.